What do you think of when you think of a horse? What mental picture just popped into your mind? Is it their power, their beauty, their speed? What you maybe didn't think of is how a horse could save someone's life. I know I didn't, not until I was forced to make a decision about my own. It came in the form of a Facebook message from a total stranger in a way I never expected. But let me back up a bit to when I was 17, back in the 1900s. I had no idea who to be or what to do. I was just going along with the status quo of what I should do. Get a good education, a good job, sick leave, annual leave, a pension. That's what we're taught, isn't it? Wherever we've grown up in the United States, this is a message that we've all heard. And I heard it every day from my father, something that was taught to him by the industrial age thinking of his generation. So I did what I thought I should. And I went to the school that I was told to go to. I took the classes I was told to take. And I sat across from a college counselor trying to plan the entire rest of my life. Sound familiar to any of you? The funny thing is, though, I pretty much sucked at the whole thing. Some days, I just would love it if I could make it through the day without turning something pink in my laundry. But I was smart. I was on scholarships, and I was just doing what I should. Slogging away, taking the classes I was told to take, and I hated school. Hated it. It took me 6 years, 5 schools, and tens of thousands of dollars to finally get that piece of paper. And by the way, I almost flunked out. By then, I'd been arrested twice, fired from my job, and I was living on student loans. I was scared to death about what was going to happen after I graduated. Planning my suicide was a daily event as I fought thinking about the mounting load of debt I was incurring for a degree I didn't even know why I needed or what I was going to do with. But then, on a blind date, I met him, my future husband. And after dating for a short while, and just before I graduated, we moved in together. And you know what feeling I got? It wasn't bliss or love. It was relief. I was going to have a place to live and my bills were going to be paid. Yeah. But let's face it. Those really aren't great reasons to cohabitate with someone. My parents told me that what I was doing was wrong, that I was living in sin like a whore, and that I was going to be used up, an old hag. So at 22, I did what I thought I should. I got married. It was a bumpy relationship from the beginning, both of us trying to do what we should, to have and be and get that perfect life that we're told we're supposed to have. Again, familiar to any of you? Yeah, me too. So it was really an impossible place for me to find myself in this relationship. But then luckily, a few years later, a gift showed up for me. I rediscovered my love of horses. I think back to my earliest childhood memory, and at the age of 4, I rode a Budweiser Clydesdale. Those suckers are big. And I knew then that the gift and the bond I had with them was special. What I didn't know was that 25 years later, I would have my own horses, and they would not only change my life, but save it as well. So hang on a second. Let's back up to that Facebook message I was telling you about earlier. After 14 years and in a crumbling marriage, I woke up one morning to a message from a strange woman about my husband. Yeah. Now, wait a minute. It's not what you might be thinking. That actually would have been easier. What she did say, though, was that I might want to talk to my husband about where he was getting his money. That as a financial advisor, he was in a lot of trouble. My heart sank as I confirmed the truth of it. He was being indicted for theft and fraud. And in a moment, my life, as I knew it, was over. Leaving my marriage was one of the hardest yet easiest things I've ever had to do. Does that make any sense? A choice where you don't have a choice, so it's easy, but at the same time, making that choice destroys any shred of who you thought you were. I was beginning to realize that maybe doing what you should really just kind of sucks, especially if you're anything like me and apparently not very good at it. But what are you going to do if you're not doing what you should? Then what should you do? I mean, wait a minute. What could you do? And that's the trouble with the shoulds. It prevents us with what could. What could be possible for us to dream, to achieve, to live the life we truly desire. But the funny thing about the path of could is that it takes faith, it takes discovery, it takes courage. So here I was, now 40 years old, living with my former personal assistant, waiting tables. Not exactly where I expected to be in my life after all this shooting I'd been doing. Courage was a word that really wasn't even in my vocabulary, and I felt like I had nothing. I felt like I was nothing. So in a moment of desperation, I ended up at a personal development seminar. And by a chance encounter, ended up on stage in an intervention with a crowd of thousands of people. I was shown that I was living in my fears, that the beliefs I had about what I should be and should do were the exact things that were holding me back from what I actually could. And when I heard these words that day, I wondered about the truth of them. Now that you know that you're strong, you don't have to work at it so hard anymore. What does that even mean? So after that event, I decided to go home and surprise my family for Christmas. I'm not sure why, because my parents and I weren't exactly on the best of terms. But have you ever felt compelled to do something or drawn to an action? Yeah, I couldn't put my finger on it either. I just knew I had to go home. So when my mom called the night before I was supposed to leave, you can imagine my surprise. I'd only told one other person about my trip. So how could she know? And that's how I answered the phone, like, "Hi, Mom. Your brother's dead." Yeah, that's what I said. She said it again. "Your brother's dead. And I know it's only 3 days before Christmas, but is there any way you can get home?" I started crying in that moment as I had a shirt in one hand, socks the other. I quietly said, "Mom, I was going to surprise you. My flight leaves in the morning." Former naval officer, a nurse, and a father. My brother died of a drug overdose at 45, the age I am now as I stand before you. Looking back at my brother's funeral, I think one of the most harrowing memories I have as an adult is seeing my father, a pillar of strength to me, sitting in his chair with silent tears streaming down his face, reading the Bible, searching for answers. It was then that I knew there was more to this courage thing than I thought. And after my brother's death and everything that had happened so suddenly, I sank into a deep state of suffering. I was binge drinking and cutting myself. I was having what I later learned were panic attacks. I discovered what night terrors were. Ever heard of them? Yeah, I hadn't. Not until was experiencing them every night. And trust me when I say I would not wish them on my worst enemy. I would hear the voice of my mentor. Now that you know that you're strong. But it was distant and hollow in my darkness. There was one thing, though. One thing that was a ray of light that shone through the darkness. It was my white horse, Trace. He was the one thing I managed to hang on to through all of this. I don't even know how I did it with everything that had happened. I was finally ignoring the voices of should that said, he's a distraction, an expense, a luxury. Jen, go get a job. Get rid of the horse. Get back on your feet. Get your act together. But the truth, he was my savior. He was the one thing that I could connect to that didn't judge me. I didn't have to show up and be something or do something. I could just be me. And we would ride and play. And I connected to his strength, his power, his spirit. But you know what got me at the deepest level? It was the peace I felt in his quiet vulnerability. This was a horsepower I didn't expect. It was in these moments of stillness with him, where the water ran deep, that he gave me strength, and I felt love. There was something in this prey animal with his fight-flight instinct that could display courage, a courage that when I connected with him, I knew was within me too. Lao Tzu makes the most interesting quote about courage. He says, being loved deeply by someone gives you strength, while loving someone deeply gives you courage. I realized that this majestic animal was giving me the courage to rediscover my purpose. And then the words of my mentor that day finally made sense. You don't have to work at it so hard anymore. Trace was not a burden to get rid of, but a pure soul that showed me how to love deeply, live compassionately, and rediscover the truth of who I am and what I could do. And that it was way more than merely what I should. Today, more and more scientific studies are showing the healing power horses can have. That what I am experiencing isn't unique. There's proof out there now that show that horses and the humans, when they connect, can help heal emotional and mental traumas, support people with physical disabilities, and allow us to connect and be stronger communicators. Something that now my 6 horses and I are sharing with people from all walks of life and all parts of the world, so they too can have their own unique experience and rediscover themselves through the spirit of the horse. Who knew such profound life lessons could come from a 1,200-pound animal that doesn't say a word, yet speaks volumes? I guess they don't call it horsepower for nothing. Thank you. Thank you.